twisters were spotted between central Indiana and western Ohio. The tornadoes took off the roofs from apartment buildings and left thousands of people with no power. Good morning, everybody. I'm Martha McCallum, live this morning for you in America's Newsroom.
Nice to be with you. Nice to be with you at home. I'm Leland Vittert, in for Bill Hemmer. Indiana Governor Mike Pence stepped away from the campaign trail to return to his home state just as the cleanup gets underway.
Very confident in our local first responders. Indiana is no stranger to tornado damage and tornado activity. In the course of the last several years, we've sadly seen this kind of an event. I've seen our first responders in action. I'm very confident that the work that's going on at this very hour we can all be proud of.
Still going through the damage here. Mike Tobin joins us live with this report from our Midwest Bureau. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Martha. Lightning and black skies preceded this outbreak of tornadoes. And the number we have right now is 35 twisters in Indiana and northern Ohio. One cell whipping up at least 6, I should say, funnel clouds out of one cell. The strongest of the tornadoes we know of thus far has been ranked as an EF3 with winds upwards of 140 miles per hour. Dramatic video out of Kokomo, Indiana, as a Starbucks took a battering and ultimately collapsed in the force of the tornado. The good news is that the injuries are relatively low. About a dozen people were hurt. None of the injuries life-threatening. It seems the worst of it is a little boy who got a deep gash. The tornadoes were serious enough to pull Indiana Governor and GOP Vice Presidential hopeful Mike Pence off the campaign trail. The governor prioritized tornado recovery and says he does not know when he'll return to campaigning.
We're going to be home so long as it takes for us to make sure that these communities have the resources and the support that they need to put themselves back together after these very violent storms.
Now, some places in the north of the state saw smaller, less powerful tornadoes. Howard and Montgomery counties have been hit the hardest. A state of emergency has been declared, freeing up resources. Around 200 people spent the night in shelters. A lot of credit for the relatively low number of injuries is going around to the first responders, early warning systems, and the fact that people listen to them. The bad news is that conditions are right for more storms today. Wow. Martha.
All right, Mike, thank you.
You got it.
And now on to politics as Donald Trump answers critics about his immigration policy, saying he still wants to build the wall, but his much-touted deportation force might be off the table. You'll remember it was his main issue when he launched his campaign, and he rode that tough talk all the way to the Republican nomination. But now he appears to be softening calls to deport 11 million illegal immigrants, and says part of it stems from input from his supporters. Take a listen.
I've had very strong people come up to me, really great people come up to me, and they've said, Mr. Trump, I love you. But to take a person that's been here for 15 or 20 years and throw them and the family out, it's so tough, Mr. Trump. I mean, I have it all the time. It's a very hard thing.
Peter Doocy live outside of Trump Tower, where the candidate will host a Republican leadership roundtable later this morning. So, Peter, a lot of talk about this. Is it an evolution? Is it a flip-flop? How big of a shift really is this?
Leland, Trump now says that his position is only softening when it comes to or with regard to people who broke the law to get into the country but haven't been breaking many laws since they've been here. So the border wall is still the centerpiece of the immigration policy, and violent criminals who are here illegally will still have to go on the other side of a border wall. And even for the people that Trump says he may let stay if he wins, he insists there would be a penalty and there would be no amnesty.
They'll pay back taxes. They have to pay taxes. There's no amnesty as such. There's no amnesty.
Right.
But we work with them.
And later on, in about an hour, Trump is going to sit down with some millennial and minority field operatives who are getting ready to go out to swing states until November. They were recruited by the RNC as part of an effort to get people involved in the Republican Party who may not have otherwise been if it was not for this Republican leadership initiative. Leland.
Well, and something you just mentioned, Peter, minority voters. Trump's really been trying hard on that end the past couple of weeks to help his poll numbers. What's the latest way Trump's trying to go after blacks and Hispanics?
Leland, Mr. Trump is now accusing Hillary Clinton of using minority voters just to win elections, and in doing so, he is calling her a bigot.
Hillary Clinton is a bigot who sees people of color only as votes, not as human beings worthy of a better future.
The Trump campaign is really working hard today to make sure that stories about the Clinton Foundation donors getting special access to Secretary of State Clinton stay on voters' minds. And the communications director, Jason Miller, told us today that, quote, Hillary Clinton's attempt to delete the single worst week of her political career isn't going to work. Her admission that there's a lot of smoke but no fire is a complete lie. And the American public's response will be to do exactly as her campaign suggests. Don't vote for her. That is an allusion to something that one of her press aides said. Basically, if you got a problem with the Clinton Foundation stuff, go vote for somebody else. It's interesting, though, speaking to different campaign staffers here this morning in Manhattan, they do not think that Hillary Clinton is going to be able to keep such a low profile moving forward as these stories bubble up. In fact, they said that her strategy that they think is just to run out the clock until November and the last week has massively backfired. Leland?
We'll see when the new polls come out. Peter Ducey live outside Trump Tower. Thanks, Peter. Martha has more.
So let's talk to John McCormick, bring him in to get some reaction to this, senior writer for the Weekly Standard. John, good morning. Good to have you with us today. Couple of big headlines here. One is the softening on immigration and the language that Donald Trump used about that yesterday in Tampa, and also the outreach to inner city voters, black voters in particular. How do you think all this is going to work?
You know, it's not clear. I think the problem for Trump is that opinions may be hardened. You know, we're 15 months into this campaign, including the primary, and he's had billions and billions of dollars of earned media. So I don't know exactly if he can move here. He might actually end up disappointing some of the people in his base by softening on immigration. This, again, was his big issue. But you don't know how things are going to shake out in the next month. I think it's important to wait until after Labor Day, see how the polls settle down then. Right now, it's not looking too good for him, though, in the polls.
Yeah, let's take a look at some of those. Florida is the number that he pointed to yesterday. This is the bright spot in the most recent numbers that we've seen. He's at 43. She's at 41. Let's pull up the other. North Carolina, we also have here. This is from the Monmouth poll, which came out yesterday. She's at 44, and she's at 44, and then in Ohio, she's at 43, leading him in both of those. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I mean, the Florida poll is definitely the best polling news he's had in a month, probably. Right now, that's narrowed the Real Clear Politics polling average of just 3.6 percentage points. Hillary Clinton's lead is just down to under 4. But the bad news for Trump is that Hillary Clinton's firewall is really holding up pretty well. If you look at 4 states in particular, Virginia, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, and Colorado, Hillary Clinton is up about 10 points or more in each of those states. And if she wins all 4 of those states, it doesn't matter what happens in Florida. It doesn't matter what happens in Iowa or even Ohio, because there's really no plausible path to an electoral college victory for Trump if Hillary takes those 4 states. And like I said, right now, those are the 4 states where she's up by about 10 points or more. He really needs to be campaigning there, trying to pick at least one of those 4 states off.
There's clearly frustration among Trump supporters about the way he's spending his time. Here's a quote that was attributed to one of his advisors that appeared yesterday. It says, he wants to feel like it's the summer of Trump again. He wants to feel the love, essentially, as he goes into these rallies. But it has a lot of Trump supporters frustrated because they say, you know, we shouldn't be in Mississippi. We shouldn't be in Texas. We should be in the battleground states, and we should basically be living in places like Pennsylvania at this point. So what's going on?
You know, that's a question that I think you'd have to ask the Trump campaign. It really doesn't make much sense, and I don't even understand. You know, Trump could get a big rally in Pennsylvania. It's not like there are no Trump supporters there. He actually has some very passionate, enthusiastic supporters in Pennsylvania and New Hampshire and Virginia. So I don't know why he's spending time in states like Texas and Mississippi. I don't think they really explain that at all. It's definitely puzzling to a lot of people.
John, thank you very much. And as John says, Leland, I think over the next few days, and especially right after Labor Day, the polls that you see will have the changes that we've seen for the past 10 days, the new campaign management and the new tone and the new focus on Hillary Clinton baked into those numbers. But I don't think we've seen numbers that really reflect that yet, and we'll see if it makes any difference.
Well, no, and we've seen this all along. The polling numbers always sort of trail by a week or two, whatever has happened. And then also come Labor Day, everybody starts paying attention a little bit more. From Donald Trump on to Hillary Clinton as she's brushing off the scandal over her emails and her family foundation, saying it's all smoke and no fire, says she. But as you might imagine, Republicans disagree.
They are so classified that even a congressman in a skiff with no telephone, no iPad, no notes, cannot even see who the author or the originator of that email string was.
All right, so is it really all smoke, as Hillary says? Trey Gowdy, the man you just heard from, joins us live next.
And it hasn't happened in nearly a decade. South Florida in the crosshairs of a powerful storm. We'll bring you the latest on its track when we come back.
And that cheer is for a very good reason. A 10-year-old girl pulled from the rubble in Italy. Get this, 17 hours after her house fell down around her. A stunning rescue and certainly a bright spot amid devastation. A live report from Italy coming up. Welcome back to a Fox News alert. A strengthening weather system down in the Caribbean could strengthen and hit the U.S. as a tropical storm this weekend. The system, as you can see there, is gaining strength as it moves west towards the Bahamas. The track then could bring it to Florida. Forecasters warn it may also bring heavy rains to the waterlogged Gulf Coast region, something that Louisiana certainly doesn't need, as they are still cleaning up from historic flooding. Obviously, we're going to keep an eye on this, and some of the forecast models bring you the latest.
There was nothing marked classified on her emails, either sent or received. Was that true?
That's not true. There were a small number of portion markings on, I think, 3 of the documents.
Secretary Clinton said, I did not email any classified material to anyone on my email. There is no classified material. Was that true?
There was classified material emailed.
That was Congressman Trey Gowdy, and that was back in July, that exchange, looking for clarification on what was found on Hillary Clinton's private email server and the emails that traversed it. Clinton is trying to move on from this issue, and it looked like she could do that. But over the past week or so, it has become increasingly clear that she cannot. She also tried to downplay this AP report that came out that claimed that half of her non-government meetings when she was Secretary of State were with people who had made donations, and sizable donations at that, to the Clinton Foundation.
I know there's a lot of smoke and there's no fire. This AP report, put it in context. It excludes nearly 2,000 meetings I had with world leaders, plus countless other meetings with U.S. government officials when I was Secretary of State. It looked at a small portion of my time.
House Oversight Committee member Trey Gowdy joins us now. Good morning, sir. Good to have you back on the program. She says it's smoke, but there is no fire here. Your thoughts?
No, it's arson. It's pyromania. It's not smoke. Even listening to her talk about the Clinton Foundation, I couldn't help but go back and remember the press conference she gave on her emails, Martha, where every single thing she said proved to be false. That's the interesting thing about credibility and believability. You can't just keep it in one compartment. When you are a habitual serial liar in this facet of life, it tends to make people not believe you in other facets of life. So when she's talking about the Clinton Foundation, I go back and remember her saying there's no classified information. I only use one device. I did it for convenience, all of which were proven to be false.
Yeah. Well, one of the big questions here, she said she separated out the personal emails. But one thing we don't have a definitive answer to is whether or not she considered foundation business to be personal. So did she dump all of the foundation-related emails with the yoga and the wedding plans?
Well, Martha, you just put your finger on the, not the $1 million question, the $100 million question. I'm sure she's going to have a press conference later this afternoon or whenever she has the next one. I hope somebody in your line of work will ask her, did you consider foundation emails to be personal or work-related? I have yet to see a single foundation email produced by the State Department that was sent by her. Yeah. So if she considered them to be personal, then we move into the facet where she and her lawyers had those emails deleted. And they didn't just push the delete button. They had them deleted where even God can't read them. They were using something called BleachBit. You don't use BleachBit for yoga emails or for bridesmaids emails. When you're using BleachBit, it is something you really do not want the world to see. So I hope someone in your line of work will ask her, did you consider foundation emails to be personal or work?
All right. The other area that I want to get into with you is this FBI interview, because every time we bring this up on this program, we get a lot of response from our viewers. People want to understand how she was able to testify. It was long awaited, this testimony, this moment when the FBI would get to sit down at a table and ask her directly the questions that they wanted the answers to, because we know that James Comey said, this isn't an inquiry, as she said. He said, this is an investigation. All right, so let's assume it's an investigation. You looked at the notes from the investigation, and what can you tell us about what you learned?
Well, I read every word of all of the witness interviews yesterday. And, Martha, I'll tell you up front, there's no reason you should not be able to read a summary of that interview that I read yesterday. You and your viewers should be able to read everything that I read yesterday that related to the FBI investigation. There's no reason you should not. My takeaway was this. Remember, James Comey said she was not indicted because he didn't have sufficient evidence on the issue of intent. I didn't see any questions on the issue of intent. There's no question she handled them negligently or extremely carelessly. He said he didn't go forward with charges because she didn't have specific criminal intent. I didn't see any questions on that. All right, she said she did it for convenience, but I didn't see the follow-up questions in the interview I read.
All right, so James Comey was not in the room during this questioning, correct? That's your understanding?
Says he wasn't.
All right, so he says he wasn't in the room. Do we know how many FBI agents were in the room questioning her?
3 or 4, and there were some DOJ lawyers also in the room, and of course her lawyers were in the room.
All right, so as an attorney, if you wanted to ascertain whether or not anyone had intent to influence something or an action or someone, what kind of questions would you have asked? You say there were no questions that went to the issue of whether or not she had intent. What would you have asked?
Well, there are 2 ways to do it. One is circumstantial evidence. The other is direct evidence. The direct evidence would be, Madam Secretary, why did you set up this email server this way? Why did you not take a state.gov email address? And her response was, and it always has been, convenience. And then that's when you press and say, well, what could be more convenient than just doing a state.gov email address? The labyrinthine effort that you made to create this separate server, that's what's inconvenient. I would then ask, why did you delete emails that you kept for a year and a half? Keep in mind, these personal emails, she didn't bother to delete them for a year and a half. It was the fall of 2014, a year and a half after she left the State Department, that she decided to start deleting emails. Why didn't you delete them the month you left? Why didn't you delete them 6 months after you left? And the other question they should have asked her is, Madam Secretary, why didn't you turn your emails over the day you left service?
We got to leave it there.
Why did you hold on to them for almost 2 years?
We are out of time. Congressman, thank you. We will be right back.
Yes.
Crews are digging through rubble with their bare hands, searching for survivors in that Italian earthquake that killed 240 people. Those rescuers working through the night, hoping against hope for more moments like this. What a sound, what a sight. Firefighters finding a young girl alive 17 hours after the quake hit. It is unclear how many people are still missing, especially given the thousands of tourists that were vacationing there. The tremors reduced 3 towns to rubble. And take a look at these photos. Before on one side, the left side of your screen, after on the right. Amy Kellogg live from Amatrice, Italy, where those pictures were taken. It's already late afternoon there. Amy, how long do rescuers think they can go on like this?
Well, there's no sign that they're stopping right now, Leland, but we just felt the strongest aftershock to date, and that, of course, sets things back a little bit. There have been over 400 aftershocks since the earthquake, and we felt some strong ones, but this one was different. It really unnerved people, Leland, because you could hear bits of rubble like what you see behind me falling from buildings, and the earth really shook, and there are some buildings here that are quite precarious and leaning at angles, so that is quite concerning to those who are around here working. In the meantime, yes, this beautiful city, Amatrice, said to be one of the most beautiful cities in Italy with all of its patrimony. Was a medieval city with churches and bell towers. It is gone. And the mayor of this town said that he already envisions a rebuilt town because he said, frankly, he owes it to the 200 people who died from just this town alone, Leland. And there have also been, as you can imagine, some distressing scenes. Police saying that they actually have detained a couple of people who have taken advantage of this situation to come in and try to do some looting. And then also family members, residents walking around here with their heads in their hands, grown men crying, looking for remnants of their home, waiting for news of loved ones. I saw a group of family members all in tears asking one of the police if they could go see one of the bodies. They think it was of one of their family members. They were told only one person can go into the danger zone. To identify that person, you will be able to see them later, the rescue worker said. I mean, Leland, how do you console people in a situation like this? It is grim, Leland.
Impossible and difficult work for the rescuers as well. Amy Kellogg there. Let us know if they find anybody else. Maybe we could use a few miracles. Thanks.
So the United States is now responding to that deadly attack on the American University in Kabul. So who was behind this?
Plus, Donald Trump hinting at a softening immigration stance. So what can we take away from the candidate who once called for a deportation force? Is Trump flip-flopping or evolving? Here's Charles Krautheimer's take.
If this is evolution, this is like a platypus going to sleep and waking up as a pussycat. That has really never happened in the history of any of our species. This is not evolution. This is a complete turnabout.
So we're back with some new details now on the terror attack that left students and police dead at the American University in Afghanistan. So far, no one has claimed responsibility, but the school in Kabul has long been in the crosshairs of the Taliban and other terrorist groups in the area. The State Department responding to this carnage this way.
We condemn this attack in the strongest possible terms. An attack on a university is an attack on the future of Afghanistan. Our embassy in Kabul, as well as our NATO counterparts at the Resolute Support Mission, are closely monitoring the situation.
This kind of university would go against everything that the Taliban, for one group, stands for. Connor Powell, live from Jerusalem, with more on what we're learning about this attack and who may have brought it about. Connor, good morning.
Well, good morning, Martha. As you pointed out, nobody's yet claimed responsibility. However, this has been a long-time target for the Taliban, and it has all the hallmarks of a Taliban attack. We know that 3 attackers, one with a suicide vest and 2 with rifles, pushed their way into the security, into the campus, which has a pretty good record of security around there, but it was at the busiest time of day. It was after work, so a lot of students were there both studying, interacting with the other students, and also taking night classes. There was estimated to be about 700 or so students there when this attack happened. Now, it happened around 7 p.m. or so local time there, but the all clear in terms of safety and security was not given until about 5 o'clock in the morning. 2 of the attackers remained at large in this ground. Elite Afghan commandos, along with U.S. and other NATO advisors, were on the ground clearing and sweeping the facility there. It did take about 10 hours or so for them to give the all clear there. At least 12 people were killed, some 40 were injured. We know at least 7 of them were students, including one that was a professor that had gone to Stanford Law School and been a Fulbright scholar. We don't yet know, and there's no reason to believe yet, that there were any American professors or anyone that was injured there. However, there have not released any information yet about all of the identities of those that were injured, Martha.
All right. So obviously the security situation in Afghanistan remains very challenging, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously been a challenge, to put it mildly, for several years now. It was just a couple weeks ago that 2 professors, one American, one Australian, from this university were actually kidnapped, chalked up to the Taliban. The security situation, particularly in Helmand province, which the U.S. military spent a lot of time and energy trying to secure from the Taliban, has really deteriorated this summer. The U.S. has actually sent about 100 or so Marines and soldiers to that area to help try to beat back the Taliban, but it comes at a very precarious time in Afghanistan's history.
No doubt. Connor, thank you very much.
There certainly can be a softening because we're not looking to hurt people. We want people. We have some great people in this country. We have some great people in this country. So, but we're going to follow the laws of this country. And, you know, we have, what people don't realize, we have very, very strong laws.
Donald Trump hinting at a possible change on his stance on immigration. He says he's still not open to amnesty, but this kind of talk is far different than what we constantly heard from Donald Trump, beginning with the moment he announced his presidential run.
I will build a great wall on our southern border, and I will have Mexico pay for that wall. They came in legally, and that's fine. But when they come in illegally, that's a whole different story. They're here illegally. You take them, they have to go back. We have at least 11 million people in this country that came in illegally. They will go out. They will come back. Some will come back, the best, through a process. They have to come back legally.
So, is Trump flip-flopping or is he evolving on immigration? Let's talk about it with Doug Schoen, former advisor to President Bill Clinton, Monica Crowley, online opinion editor for the Washington Times, both Fox News contributors, and we appreciate you both being here this Thursday. Doug, first to you. Forget for a second what we call it and sort of what the semantics are. Number one, is it good politics? Number two, will it make a difference with voters, especially independent voters?
Well, it is good politics because Donald Trump, it's pretty clear, was not going to get elected with his extreme immigration platform from the primaries. That being said, will it persuade people? He's been all over the lot on so many issues that for him now to praise the laws, as you just heard him do, Leland, to talk about a softening of his policies, to at one point praise even President Obama's deportations, is a far cry from what he said during the primaries. And to me, it's very much an open question whether this will persuade anybody. But it was pretty clear he couldn't get elected unless he, as some have put it, evolved. I would call flip-flopped his position.
All right, so Monica, to this end, is this a risk for Donald Trump with his core supporters who are so devoted to him and some were so inspired by his tough talk on immigration? Do they suddenly go, okay, this guy's just like every other politician, as Doug is saying?
Well, I mean, he is running a risk if, in fact, he follows through with this. But let's not jump to any conclusions here. Donald Trump is very good at leaving certain positions vague, as he did over the last couple of days. It remains unclear what he really means. Mr. Trump is going to be giving a major policy speech on illegal immigration in the next week or so, Leland. So let's see what he says in a formal policy address, because that address will then set the framework going forward into the general campaign. So I want to wait to see what he really means by this going forward. I would also say that, look, to Doug's point, he sees the huge discrepancy among Hispanic voters between himself and Mrs. Clinton. So he knows he's got some repair work to do there if he's going to have any chance of winning the general. But he also needs to persuade swing voters, particularly white suburban voters, and in particular women who may be a little uncomfortable with the deportation approach. Keep in mind, Mr. Trump is still talking about no amnesty, no citizenship. He's still very forcefully arguing for building the wall, for deporting violent and other serious criminals, and for enforcing existing laws. The one problem that he's got, Leland, here is that when he talks about enforcing existing laws call for the deportation of those who are already here illegally.
So Doug, how do you square this circle, and does it take any part of the wind out of Hillary Clinton's sails, as she has been so tough going after Donald Trump on the issue of immigration? Is this, in one way or another, immunize him from those kinds of attacks, inoculate him?
Leland, there are very few things in life I'm sure of. but this will not immunize him. I was with, just before coming on, a tried and true Ted Cruz supporter who said he has deep, deep doubts and reservations of the type you heard Monica begin to voice. Look, you can't have your presidential campaign be a work in progress as you go into Labor Day. And Secretary Clinton is vulnerable. Monica and I both believe that and have seen it in the polls. But if Trump is unclear and takes weeks to clarify his position on a signature issue, the only one who will lose as a result, in my judgment, is Donald Trump.
And to that end, Monica, Ann Coulter, who's been a big supporter of Donald Trump, was sort of mocking him this morning on Twitter, saying, well, gee, if this is too hard to do, we should, maybe we shouldn't do it. Someone's quoting her book saying there's nothing Trump can do that won't be forgiven except change his immigration policies. Is this a little more dangerous than perhaps the Trump folks realize? Is that why we're now hearing, oh, wait until this speech rather than to listen to what he said in the town halls?
Well, yeah, like I said, he is running a risk with some of his core supporters because, remember, Leland, illegal immigration really launched his campaign into the stratosphere. Once he made those comments over a year ago on illegal immigration and building the wall, he catapulted into the #1 spot and never really let it go. And now he's the Republican nominee largely because of it. So I think he is running a little bit of a risk. On the other hand, the vast majority of his supporters are so devoted to him and feel so passionately about him and so believe in him that I think they're willing to forgive some policy positions. I think there's one big challenge, though, here. He built his candidacy and his brand on being an unpolitician, somebody who didn't follow the traditional path. If he's going to follow a traditional approach and shift gears for a general, that might lose him a little bit of support.
Got to bounce, guys.
Great, thank you.
It was Donald Trump who said he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and still keep all of his supporters.
He may well have to see with this immigration flip-flop if they still stay with him.
All right. Doug, Monica, thanks, guys. August 31st for that speech.
So drug company Mylan responding to price gouging claims with expanded programs to make EpiPens more affordable. This has really blown up over the course of the last 2 days. The CEO of the company says that patients can now use a savings card to save up to $300 on the $600 drug. So that makes it $300. I think it's 2 EpiPens that you get in a set. This comes after Hillary Clinton joined lawmakers criticizing the company for hiking prices 500% since 2009, rather.
A lot of blowback on that. Former President Bill Clinton now coming out to defend that embattled family foundation.
The people who gave the money knew exactly what they were doing. And I have nothing to say about it. Except I'm really proud. I'm proud of what they've done.
Will new reports of Clinton Foundation donors getting special access to Hillary Clinton's State Department hurt Hillary Clinton's now campaign for president? And how is the media covering all this? Howard Kurtz joining us next.
Jesus.
You guys, you have to watch the rest of this video, which we're going to show coming up. This little seal jumps onto a boat to save his own you-know-what, while these killer whales are just a few feet away. And he does it several times. Stick around. We'll be right back. You got to see this.
No, you can't shove them off. No,
that's... I don't...
So we are back, and Hillary Clinton is taking a lot of heat for revelations about her emails and links between the Clinton Foundation and the State Department when she was Secretary of State. But is the media giving it as much attention as they are giving to things like Donald Trump and the tweets that he sends out? We asked that question. Howard Kurtz, Fox News media analyst and host of Media Buzz, joins us with a look at whether or not there is a bit of bias going on here. So, Howie, what do you think?
Good morning, Martha. As we kick off our new Bias Watch segment, it's no secret that Donald Trump gets far more media scrutiny and does far more interviews than Hillary Clinton. We took a closer look at the network evening newscasts over the past week. Last Friday, for instance, networks were consumed with Donald Trump's campaign shakeup. The CBS Evening News doing a full story on that.
Donald Trump is rebooting his campaign, and the first person to get the boot today was his campaign chairman.
And ABC's World News Tonight covering Trump's expression of regret for some of his past rhetoric and his visit to flood-stricken Louisiana. Questions about the Clinton Foundation were treated as a footnote, drawing no coverage on CBS and 3 sentences on both NBC and ABC.
There's also news at this hour, Tom, about the Clinton Foundation.
David, today former President Bill Clinton made a major announcement saying the Clinton Foundation will no longer accept foreign or corporate donations if Hillary Clinton is elected president.
Or take Monday night this week, all three newscasts prominently covering Trump's postponing of a planned address on dealing with illegal immigrants.
We begin tonight with Donald Trump today suddenly putting a major speech on immigration on hold.
Donald Trump took his campaign to a battleground state as he reconsiders his immigration policy.
Questions swirling around Donald Trump and his stance on immigration, one of his signature issues.
But Monday was also the day we learned that the FBI had found another 15,000 emails from Clinton's private server, and the conservative group Judicial Watch released new emails involving favor-seeking by the Clinton Foundation. CBS and NBC's Nightly News did air stories on the subject, but ABC carried only a few sentences. By Tuesday, after the New York Times made the foundation its lead story, the network newscast did more, but CBS, for instance, covered Clinton after its lead story on Trump, quote, retooling his immigration policy. Now, it's true that the tangled web between Clinton's State Department and her family foundation is an old story and can also be a complicated one. Covering Trump's controversial remarks and tweets is easier and better for clicks and ratings, but that's no excuse for what is clearly an unbalanced level of coverage. Bias, though, can work in both directions. Some conservative media outlets and commentators keep pushing unsubstantiated theories about Hillary Clinton's health, pointing to isolated photos and a video that don't prove anything. Martha.
Interesting. When you look at that AP story that looked into the foundation, the number of meetings that Hillary Clinton had, and how many of her non-governmental meetings were with foundation donors when she was Secretary of State, that's the same group of reporters, I believe, who uncovered the Paul Manafort story in terms of the Ukraine ties, and also the fact that there was an email server in Chappaqua that was Hillary's. So you would think that that AP story would have gotten, sort of equal credence as those other two stories did, Howie.
Well, it's gotten a fair amount of traction in the media. It didn't make the print edition of the New York Times. I think that was a misjudgment. The Times did put it online. It's interesting, we're talking here about bias. Hillary Clinton's campaign, perhaps not used to the intense level of media scrutiny that Trump routinely receives, has pushed back against that story and calling it distorted and so forth. But the questions the Clinton campaign has raised, for instance, only 2 years of her calendar were included because AP sued, and that's all it was able to get the State Department to cough up. All those caveats are in the story. And so I think the story was written very carefully worded and with some restraint.
Yeah, I mean, there has been some sort of scrutiny from Democrats, including Axelrod, who basically said that he didn't think Hillary Clinton should be laughing off the story. She first chose to deal with it on an appearance with Jimmy Kimmel, and she kind of laughed about the revelations here, Howie.
No, the fascinating thing here is that some liberal editorial pages and even the uber-liberal Huffington Post have called for the Clintons to shut down the foundation now. Right. And just to briefly circle back to the network news coverage, if we can throw up a graphic, you look at the imbalance overall. There's been some good reporting on the Clinton campaign, but this year, 979 minutes devoted to Donald Trump on the network evening newscast, 362 minutes to Hillary Clinton.
Well, I guess he puts himself out there a lot more than she does, so there's more fodder for those newscasts on a daily basis. Maybe part of the reason for that as well. Howie, thank you. Looking forward to more of these. We'll see him throughout the week. Thanks, Howie.
Thanks, Martha.
There were some tense moments aboard a U.S. warship deployed overseas. Here is the video, and now Iran. Heroin use among young adults has more than doubled in the past decade, and the CDC is now sounding the alarm bells at this statistic. Since 2002, heroin-related deaths have quadrupled. Chief Correspondent Jonathan Hunt live from our West Coast newsroom with more. Hi, Jonathan.
Hey, Leland. America's appetite for dangerous drugs is growing and evolving every year. And as it grows, so do the number of deaths from heroin.
It's unbelievable how available and how inexpensive heroin is now.
Dr. Damon Raskin has witnessed firsthand the explosion in heroin abuse and its spread from inner-city mean streets to tree-lined suburbs.
I'm not admitting homeless people or people in shelters or whatnot. These are upper middle class young people who grew up in nice environments, nice neighborhoods.
The Centers for Disease Control reports heroin use in the U.S. increased by 63% between 2002 and 2013. And in 2014, heroin overdoses killed more than 10,500 people across the country. The reason for the huge rise is threefold, according to the experts. First, Mexican cartels saw a business opportunity.
As the DEA was cranking down on pill mills in the United States and the supply of pharmaceutical opiates became, much more constricted, the Mexicans saw a void there and were able to fill it with their own heroin.
Second, the cartels made heroin much cheaper than prescription drugs.
One pill of oxycodone, say 30 milligrams, could be up to $30 or $50 a pill. And I have patients taking 20 to 30 pills a day. So that really adds up. When you could go down the corner and get a bag of heroin and get high for $5.
And finally, they made it easy to get.
The Mexican cartels are kind of like the Domino's pizza delivery man. They will bring it right to your door.
The result, Leland, 30 Americans approximately dying every day of every week from a heroin overdose. Leland?
Yeah, and that could get worse as there's now reports that heroin dealers are putting elephant tranquilizers to make the drugs even more potent. Jonathan Hunt, thanks so much. Martha?
Well, the founder of WikiLeaks is promising bombshell revelations, saying that his team is currently working around the clock to find more information on Hillary Clinton before you head to the polls. We're going to have details on what he said, and then there is this. We'll be right back. WikiLeaks be a game changer in 2016. Julian Assange promising that he is going through lots of data and information on Hillary Clinton that they are going to release before Americans head to the polls. Welcome, everybody, to Hour 2 now of America's Newsroom. I'm Martha McCallum.
And I'm Leland Vittert in for Bill Hemmer. Nice to be with you. Nice to be with you at home. Julian Assange, who has made promises before and kept them, telling Megyn Kelly his team is working around the clock, combing through thousands of pages of documents from Clinton's election campaign. And he's promising the revelations will, quote, be significant.
We have received quite a lot of material, stimulated, of course, by the U.S. election process and by our major DNC revelation, which has now led to the resignation of 5 top officials in the DNC, including Debbie Wasserman Schultz. It's a complex business, what we do. We have to assess the veracity. We have a perfect 10-year record so far in never getting it wrong. We want to keep that reputation.
Fox team coverage, special report anchor Brett Baer with us shortly. We begin with Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge live in Washington. Good morning, Catherine.
Well, thank you, Leland. There was a lot more in that Kelly file interview. The head of WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, promising more documents and more surprises for the Democratic presidential nominee well before November.
I think it's significant. It depends on how it catches fire in the public and in the media.
And here's why that matters. WikiLeaks was behind the document dump from the Democratic National Committee and the DCCC. That's the group that raises money for House Democrats. And we learned this week that there are at least 14,900 Clinton emails that were recovered by FBI specialists that have only been seen by the FBI and Clinton's inner circle. And there is a very real and strong possibility that WikiLeaks has some of the same documents recovered by the FBI that Clinton and her team deleted, but were in fact government business and not personal, Leland.
The other big story there just behind you at Capitol Hill, that FBI interview with Mrs. Clinton about her email server. The FBI delivered it to Congress. Learning anything more about that? Any leaks coming out?
Well, Leland, in the last hour, Martha did an interview with the Republican Congressman Trey Gowdy and made significant news, revealing new details about the FBI's line of questioning with Clinton over that July 4th weekend. At his statement to the nation in July that was broadcast nationally, Director Comey said no reasonable prosecutor would bring a criminal case because there was no strong evidence of intent to break the law. But the congressman told Martha that the FBI interviews show that Clinton was really never pressed on the issue.
My takeaway was this. Remember, James Comey said she was not indicted because he didn't have sufficient evidence on the issue of intent. I didn't see any questions on the issue of intent. There's no question she handled them negligently or extremely carelessly. He said he didn't go forward with charges because she didn't have specific criminal intent. I didn't see any questions on that. She said she did it for convenience, but I didn't see the follow-up questions in the interview I read.
We only have the assessment, if you will, of Congressman Gowdy, but I would note that this was an issue that he raised with Director Comey during that 5-hour testimony before the House Government Oversight Committee. And Congressman Gowdy made the point then that you can base intent largely on circumstantial evidence, and that is what he had done in his career as a federal prosecutor. And he seemed somewhat dumbfounded that the FBI director had not found that there was significant and effective, if you will, circumstantial evidence. As one example, just simply buying the server showing the intent to move those records outside of government channels, Leland.
All right. Catherine Herridge live in Washington this morning. Thanks, Catherine. Martha has more.
Interesting stuff, and it's being pursued. So for more on this, Brett Baer from the Anchor of Special Report, of course, joins us this morning. Brett, good morning to you. I want to go back to the Julian Assange issue first. He's giving reason to believe that they have access perhaps to some of these FBI documents that only the FBI has seen, and that it may reflect on Hillary Clinton, and he says he intends to get it out before the election. What do you think is the impact potentially of this?
Potentially significant. I mean, you talk to Democrats, top Democrats, they won't say it publicly. A few have said it publicly, but most will say privately that they are worried that there is some kind of bombshell that comes out in October, excuse me, in these emails that causes Hillary Clinton to stumble. And that because of a lack of enthusiasm about her campaign overall as far as a candidate, that they worry that these things are hanging like a sword of Damocles over this campaign. Now, others say, listen, there's nothing in there, and even if there is something, they'll be able to get through it, but much like they have now, just plowing through. But it adds to the honest and trustworthy issue, and the polls show that upside down as we are now on 264 days since her last press conference with reporters who cover her.
I mean, these emails are not the ones that she turned over. These are the ones that the FBI found and that the Clinton folks decided not to turn over. She has laughed the whole thing off. She said, you know, my emails are so boring, nobody would want to read them. But apparently the folks at WikiLeaks are quite interested in reading them, and they're going through them methodically. Julian Assange says he hasn't been wrong before, doesn't want to be wrong now, so we'll see what comes of that. I want to play a little bit more sound for you from the campaign trail from last night and some Hillary Clinton reaction to Donald Trump. Let's watch this.
Hillary Clinton is a bigot who sees people of color only as votes, not as human beings worthy of a better future.
It reminds me of that great saying that Maya Angelou had, that when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. And Donald Trump has shown us who he is. And we ought to believe him. He is taking a hate movement mainstream. He's brought it into his campaign.
I mean, you know, that word is a strong one, and it's one that has been aimed at Donald Trump over the course of this campaign, and now he's aiming it right back at Hillary Clinton, Brett.
If you go to that video, I love the reaction of that one woman to his left. She says, "Whoa!" You know, whoa. In the background, like her eyes get big as saucers when he says that. I think this sentence obviously was designed. It was written into a speech. It was designed to get attention, and it did, and it does. It also is a day ahead of what we believe will be a pretty aggressive speech by Hillary Clinton today on the alt-right movement, the alternative right movement that we've heard about and learned about, I guess, in terminology over the past few days. I think that this may have been a shot across the bow at the beginning of that. He's saying that that Hillary Clinton takes those votes for granted, and he's trying to make inroads. I think critics would say that he hasn't done enough on that, hasn't gone to those communities and made the outreach, but it seems like he's trying to work those into his speech and get attention with how he says it.
Yeah, I mean, the question, I guess, is whether it's going to be too little too late. The word is that he's going to go to some inner city venues, some stops, some cities and communities, and make visits to them in the coming weeks. But he's turning this idea on its head, you know, that black voters believe that Democrats, you know, essentially are there for them. And he's saying, you know, he really went to the issue of school choice. In the longer version of that Bigot comment, he says that he believes the reason that she's bigoted is that she's not allowing children in these inner city communities to have a choice about which school to make. So why should other kids get a choice and these kids don't? I mean, that's the question, Brett, whether or not he can make this land with any of the voters. He's so low in the polls with minority voters. Can he cross that bridge this late in the game?
You know, he's traveling with, on these trips, Dr. Ben Carson, who arguably articulates the plight of inner city African-American life better than most, and turns it also on its head about what can be done that's not being done in some of those Democrat-run cities. I think that by traveling with him, that helps Donald Trump. Carson, however, articulates it a lot better than Donald Trump has, and we'll see if that tone and delivery changes.
Yeah. All right, Brett, thank you very much. We'll see you tonight.
All right, see you.
Indiana Governor Mike Pence, you can see him right there. That news conference scheduled sometime within this hour. Pence and back in his home state to tour damage left behind after multiple twisters touched down. This video really showing the enormity of just one of the tornadoes. At least 12 twisters tore through northern and central Indiana yesterday. One of the areas hardest hit is just north of Indianapolis. The twisters ripping off roofs and sending air conditioners flying through Kokomo, Indiana. A local Starbucks there was flattened. About a dozen people were injured, but get this, none of them seriously.
I tried to push the door, and the wind was just blowing so fast. It was basically like a train going on. When I looked out, I watched it take out the house behind me and the two houses north of me.
The mayor of Kokomo says crews from everywhere in the state are arriving this morning to help restore power and obviously begin a very long cleanup process. Bad news, possibly more bad weather headed their way.
And some tense moments aboard a U.S. warship while the Iranian military sent 4 boats on a drive-by. Look at this scene in open water.
Yeah, and now the Iranians are complaining about it. Also, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump grabbing all the headlines. But Libertarian Gary Johnson joins us live to tell us how, get this, he thinks it may work in his favor.
And Hillary Clinton answering questions on a cable network after mostly dodging the media for a couple of months. Here is Donald Trump on the matter.
Hillary Clinton doesn't do speeches. She doesn't do press conferences. It's been almost 300 days. People don't know where she is.
While Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton continue to trade jabs on the campaign trail, Libertarian presidential candidate Gary Johnson is keeping a relatively low profile, and he believes that that will help him when the election rolls around. Right now, Clinton leads Trump by 4 points in the Real Clear Politics average of national polls. Johnson is at 8.7%, is about 6 points from clinching a spot in that first debate. Gary Johnson joins us now, the Libertarian candidate for president and former governor of New Mexico. Governor, welcome. Good to have you with us today.
Martha, good to be with you. Thank you.
So tell me why you think it's a good thing that people are not as aware of you at this point in the election.
Well, by good things, 70% of Americans don't even know that myself and Bill Weld are running for president and vice president. And so given the resources that we have and the time remaining, as more people do become aware, I think that portends that we will actually be in the presidential debates. And I think that we're representing most Americans. I think 60% of Americans are fiscally conservative, socially inclusive. Really, I think most Americans question us intervening militarily, supporting regime change that has resulted in a less safe world. bring the world together with free trade diplomacy. I think that's reflective of most Americans. And when it comes to Bill Weld and myself, two former Republican governors serving in heavily blue states, look, you don't have to guess whether or not we're going to be successful or not. We made a difference in our states, and a positive difference in our states. So I think there'll be a scrutiny that will come along with more people understanding who we are and the fact that we are in the race.
That's the challenge, and that's why we're happy to have you with us today. You know, when you look at the 8.6% number, it's a decent number when you look at how close this race is. So who do you think you draw from? You know, if you were not in the race, who do you think that would help?
Well, I think it's equal from both sides. And interestingly, the Presidential Debate Commission has identified the 5 polls that they're going to use for the presidential debates. We're at 10% in those polls, but just 6 or 7 weeks ago, we were probably 6% in those polls. So there's been a steady ratcheting up. We're optimistic.
Let's get your take on some of these issues, and I want to play what Donald Trump recently said about immigration, and would love to hear your thoughts. Let's play that.
Here's the big question, though.
Go ahead.
No citizenship.
No citizenship. No citizenship.
Everyone agree with that?
All right. I mean, go a step further. They'll pay back taxes. They have to pay taxes. There's no amnesty as such. There's no amnesty.
Right.
But we work with them. Now, okay, but when I look at the rooms, and I have this all over, now everybody agrees we get the bad ones out.
So he's said to be softening his stance on immigration a bit, and it sounds awfully like what we heard from Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio, who did not survive this process. What do you think about Donald Trump's evolution on immigration, and where do you stand?
Well, I think there's a reason why we have 11 million undocumented workers in this country, and that is we've made it impossible for them to come across the border legally to get jobs that U.S. citizens don't want. So we should make it as easy as possible to get a work visa. And a work visa should entail a background check and a Social Security card that applicable taxes get paid. And let's not build a wall across the border. Back to being able to cross easily with a work visa. And then when it comes to citizenship, look, that's part of comprehensive immigration reform. There should be a pathway to citizenship for the 11 million undocumented workers that are here in this country right now. Set up an easy process where you can come in the door, get a work visa as long as you've been law-abiding. That doesn't jump you in the line to become a citizen, but back to having a process for citizenship. We're a country of immigrants. We should embrace immigration.
Yeah, we've heard about comprehensive reform for so many years it's hard to count, and haven't gotten anywhere with it so far. I do want to get your thoughts on the Clinton Foundation. Go ahead, quickly.
How about a former border governor calling out both sides on this, believing that I do understand this issue?
All right, quick thought on the Clinton Foundation for me and the revelations we've seen in the past few days. Does that concern you?
Well, it's pay to play. I think it's plain and simple. It's pay to play, and when I look at, or when I saw those speaking fees by Bill Clinton, it wasn't as clear for me as it is today. Those speaking fees were linked with special consideration for by who. Those fees were being paid by companies, individuals that were getting access, were getting special privilege from Hillary being Secretary of State. It's pay to play, and it's what government shouldn't be about. My 8 years as governor, not one bit of that took place. I had a supporter say to me the other day, you know, Gary, we know that it didn't take place with you. We all know that. It's never happened before, and it will probably never happen again. I'll just say it is possible that you can serve in government and not have this come to play. Good government is easy. It's not hard. But it just starts with being honest and, you know, serving the public in a way that you look at issues and you just do the best for people. You sign on to things that make things better. You reject things that give special privilege.
That sounds like such a simple and good idea, sir. And I think that everybody can be on board with that idea. Gary Johnson, former governor of New Mexico and presidential candidate, thank you for being here today. We appreciate you coming on.
Martha, I so appreciate being on. Thank you.
You bet.
And when we come back to more accusations that Donald Trump is, quote-unquote, flip-flopping on immigration. The Trump campaign responds next.
Crazy. This is crazy. Look at him hit the medium again. He's going to go on the... He just took out that car, B. Yeah. He just took out that car.
Wow. A dump truck out of control, smashing into cars as it barrels down a busy boulevard. We'll be right back. So let's give you a quick look at what's going on. Just about a block away from here at Trump Tower, Donald Trump is holding a roundtable on GOP leadership initiatives, speaking to many minority members of GOP leadership, and we've been listening to it. We'll let you know if there's any news made here, but he is at the conference boardroom table at Trump Tower, just a block or so away from here. More on that as we come back, as we get.
Iran is now saying any foreign ships found in its territorial waters could lead to what they're calling a confrontation. It comes as we are getting this video from the U.S. Navy of Iranian gunboats harassing the USS Nitsa yesterday in the Straits of Hormuz. General Jack Keane, Fox News military analyst, retired four-star general of the U.S. Army, chairman of the Institute of Study of War, and here with us today. Appreciate it, General. You think about this. We just recently gave the Iranians $1.3 billion, and in return, we get this and this kind of behavior. You really feel like they're playing us for fools.
Well, they have been for some time. I mean, for 8 years, it's a principal foreign policy objective of the Obama administration, which has driven so many of his policy decisions in the Middle East, is this nuclear deal. And the desire, as a result of that deal, that the Iranians would join the international community of nations and essentially behave like other nations.
This behavior is
not... This is ridiculous.
Yeah, and it's important to note, those are gunboats. Those are not out to deliver, welcome gift baskets to the U.S. Navy warships there. What are the rules of engagement in a case like this? At some point, is a U.S. captain going to have to decide to fire some warning shots and send these guys on their way?
The fact is the Navy has clearly, and that captain of that vessel, the authority to sink those ships if he believes lethal force is used against them. And they have other rules of engagement that are classified based on what the proximity is. And certainly one of the stages that they would go through is to fire a warning shot at some point. I think we're probably at that point just to make certain that they leave the area based on our invitation to leave, not theirs. Because what they're doing here, their message is truly not for us. It's not so much that. It's for the Sunni Arab states. They are telling them...
Saudi Arabia, those kind of places.
All of them. After the nuke deal, 2015, July, the gloves are off. We're still going to be the dominant power in the region, and this is an example of it. Firing the medium ballistic missiles is another example. Taking hostages is another example.
Yeah, well, no, to your point, if you can get that close to a U.S. Navy warship with no consequences, that sends a pretty powerful message about who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the humiliation that they want.
Yeah.
And their strategic objective remains the same, to dominate the region, to drive the United States out of the region, and to destroy the state of Israel so they can have regional hegemony. They state that every single year, Leland.
They make no bones about it. So far, the only thing from the U.S. warships was some flares going up. We'll see if that changes. Thanks, General.
Good talking to you.
You too. Martha?
Thank you, Leland. The death toll rising after that catastrophic earthquake in central Italy. That is the story that you want to see. So many are not like that, but thank goodness. 17 hours under the rubble, that little girl survived, and they gave all of those first responders who've been working so hard some hope that they may see more survivors out there.
Hope and some miracles. And is Donald Trump signaling a shift on his immigration policy after hearing from some Latino families?
They've said, Mr. Trump, I love you. But to take a person that's been here for 15 or 20 years and throw them and the family out, it's so tough, Mr. Trump. I mean, I have it all the time. It's a very, very hard thing.
So now we're up 15. Yeah, 15 or 20. So that's been over 1 week. So a lot of good things have been happening. Tremendous things have been happening. And Lynn, you have been so amazing. Thank you very much. Yes. It's an honor. It was so... I watched you the other day. You were in one of the shows, and it was incredible. So thank you. Hello, Chris. Hello, sir. last night. Good, right?
Very good.
Wasn't that great? That was amazing people last night. And Brexit was something, right?
Could you tell us what you've been talking about here?
Well, we're just talking about the fact that we have great relationships and the numbers are going up with the African American community rapidly. We've had, and I've always had great relationships with the African American community, and now, I've made it such a focal point. Mark Burns has been with us all the way, and he sees what's happening. He sees what's going on. But I've made it a very important focal point in the speeches themselves, talking about the little work that's been done by the Democrats for African Americans. They've been very disrespectful, as far as I'm concerned, to the African American population of this country, and we are making it a very important part of our speeches and of our thought process, and it's had a tremendous impact. Yeah. It's had a tremendous impact.
And would you say that what you've been emphasizing is the fact that in order to make America great again, we have to make all of it great, including our inner cities. We can't have big pockets of people.
100%. Including the Hispanics, African Americans, everybody. It's got to be everybody, or we don't have a great country. We have a divided country. And it's been a very important part. Most of you have been in my speeches over the last couple of weeks. It's been a very important element. It's been very, very important. And it's having an impact. I mean, you see what's going on with the polls. The polls just came out. The CNN just came out. We're leading in Florida. A couple of them have come out. We're leading in Florida. We're doing well all over. And I guess nationally we have a couple where we're also leading. And a big difference. And people are hearing the message. But a very important part of the message for me is the African American community, because they have really been let down by Hillary Clinton and the Democrats.
Are you going to need to give an immigration speech at some point to lay out all these points you've been making?
Sure, I will be doing that, I'd say, over the next week or so. I look forward to that. I'm very strong on illegal immigration. Don't let the media fool the media. Very strong on illegal immigration. We have to be. We have no choice. We either have a country or we don't. We either have borders or we don't. The wall is very important. But so I'll be making a speech on that, I would say, over the next week, laying out an exact plan, and I think people will have great respect for the plan. Thank you.
One of the issues affecting African Americans is lending and discriminatory lending practices. Yeah. Do you plan to audit any banks, or do you plan to take action to make sure that banks end discriminatory lending practices against African Americans?
Banks have been, whether it's through certain laws, but Dodd-Frank. You look at some of these laws; it's impossible for banks to loan money to anybody. But the African American population has absolutely been treated terribly by the banks. If you're African American, it is very, very hard to get a loan, and I want to look into it because I've heard it from more and more people. I've heard it from Mark, Master Burns. I've heard it from so many people where they go into a bank, they have good credit, they have a good job, they're African American, they can't get a loan. Under any circumstances, they go from bank to bank to bank. So we're going to look into that. Okay? Thank you. Good point. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Donald Trump. In the conference, African American is a group he's working hard to try to pull his numbers up with, and he met with leaders. Pastor Mark Burns in the room. You also saw Steve Bannon, who is the new chairman of the campaign, off to the left of Donald Trump there, and Kellyanne Conway also in the room as they try to craft this campaign and hone it. They're getting criticized for not spending enough time in battleground states, but he is clearly trying to get a national message out through the media. He said, "Don't let the media confuse the media," as he answered some of those questions there. So interesting moments going on over there across the way from us this morning, Leland.
Interesting moments indeed, and a lot of people are saying this is a new Donald Trump with new campaign management. Let's bring in former Massachusetts Senator and Fox News contributor Scott Brown, also a Trump supporter. So I will put it to you, Scott, good to see you. Is this a new Donald Trump?
Well, I think it's the emergence of the Donald Trump that I have known and the Donald Trump that I supported as his first former or president federal elected official supporting him. So that's the guy that I've known, and I'm glad that that person is now coming out for others to see as well.
There's always so much discussion when we see a Trump reset, if you will, and it's happened before, normally for 1 or 2 days. Now we're on to about a week so far here. Can it last? Can this sort of reasoned, thoughtful answers to some very important questions, can it last before we go into the Twitter diatribes and those kinds of things?
Well, that's a great question, and I think he's getting into his stride. It's basically a year now since he first announced, going up against the Clinton machine, which you have that intersection of money and politics and that power structure that's been in play for decades. So it's tough going up against that type of apparatus, and I think he's finally hitting his stride. He seems to be getting good guidance and listening to that guidance, which is critically important.
Well, unclear exactly where the advice came to, or if it was his own decision to change a little bit, the tone at least, in terms of what he has been saying about immigration. Says he's going to still build the wall, but the deportation force may be off the table. Now there's an argument over whether it's amnesty or whether it's not, whether illegal immigrants can go back, pay back taxes, then come back to the United States. We've heard all sorts of different versions of this. Take a look at what Senator Ted Cruz's folks put out yesterday. Here's a quote. Everything Trump promises comes with an expiration date. We knew it during the primary, and now it's apparent he, meaning Trump, has duped his most loyal supporters on the issue they care about most, immigration. Don't say we didn't warn them. Donald Trump's famous for saying I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and I'd still have my supporters, but is this a bridge too far?
First of all, I respect Ted Cruz, and here's my message to Ted Cruz. It's that when he is in the Senate and Donald Trump is the president, he should be the first one to knock on the door, and vice versa, to get Ted's guidance on this very important issue. I don't believe he's changed. I believe he's always been compassionate, as we all have. We're a compassionate country. We're going to secure the border, and Mexico's going to pay it, either by offsets, increased fees, or the like. We need to have e-verification. We need to make sure that we follow the law, and we need to get rid of every single criminal who has a record.
You can't deny that there's a serious change in tone here from a deportation force and the discussion of every illegal immigrant has to go home and these kinds of things to what we're hearing now.
Leland, here's the key. Whatever plan comes up, and he said he's giving a speech on this very issue, so we're kind of like guessing what's going to happen. He's going to put it out in the next week and a half. Whatever happens, here's what the American people object to. They do not want these people getting benefits of any kind whatsoever, food stamps, housing, and the like, during whatever process we set up as Congress and as the president does, and all the people concerned about it. They need to get in a room, shut the door, and come up with a plan. But during that time, they cannot be getting any benefits, and that's been the problem with any and all plans prior to this one.
Well, and we'll see if that is laid out. August 31st is a big speech in Phoenix by Donald Trump. We'll see if that covers the immigration policy thing. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Leland.
All right. Martha?
So Hillary Clinton brushing off calls for a news conference.
I've got a lot that I have been sharing with the press, talking to the press, as I'm doing with you right now. So, stay tuned.
Stay tuned. It is 260 days since her last news conference, so how long will she go? That plus this.
Oh, no! Oh!
Wow. That caused a lot of damage.
I've been watching so carefully over the past month. Hillary Clinton doesn't do speeches. She doesn't do press conferences. It's been almost 300 days. She doesn't do rallies of any consequence.
Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, Robbie Mook, says that the candidate might consider holding a news conference with reporters on the campaign trail. It has been more than 260 days since the last one, but Clinton herself seems content talking to select reporters one-on-one.
Talking to three this year. So I'm going to continue talking with the press and answering questions. And
why not give a press conference, though, with a lot of different reporters?
Well, I've got a lot that I have been sharing with the press, talking to the press, as I'm doing with you right now.
Ashley Pratt is a Republican strategist. Nomiki Konst hosts The Filter on SiriusXM. She is a Democratic strategist. Welcome to both of you. You know, Nomiki, I remember the last time she gave a press conference, and you know, it's not an environment that she's incredibly comfortable in. She doesn't love fielding questions. We just watched Donald Trump a few minutes ago say that he was done about 5 times, and then he kept opening it up for just one more question because he enjoys that forum a lot. Why not? Why wouldn't she put herself in that environment right now?
Well, I think there's 2 issues here. There's the issue that she's just not a natural politician, and she's said that over and over, and she just doesn't feel comfortable in those sorts of situations. And there's also the issue of the fact that she has 30 years of experience, and she knows that the other side and the press are going to be critical of her record and experience. Some of it legitimate, that there's a lot of press that goes after her for the attacks that Republicans throw at her, and some of it is not so legitimate in that she creates this mess by controlling the message so much. I mean, this is a campaign where they have the press on a different airplane than she is. That's unheard of. The fact that she won't do press conferences, or she counts 3-second or 30-second interviews with somebody as an interview, or she counts her own podcast as one of those 300 interviews. Her own podcast where the reporter is someone who works for her on her staff. So, you know, I think Donald Trump does the same thing by restricting the press, by putting them in a cage, by banning press, but he does it blatantly. The Democrats are doing it right now in a much more controlled setting, and now she's getting called out for it. I hope she's more transparent, because I don't think she has anything to hide. That's the problem, is if you don't act like you have anything to hide, then no one thinks you have anything to hide. And right now, the emails are actually showing there's no smoke there. There's no smoke where there's no fire where there's smoke in this situation. She's just being very defensive, and that doesn't look good.
Well, there are so many questions that so many reporters would love to ask her. For example, the question that I just brought up with Trey Gowdy, which is whether or not when they went through and culled the emails to figure out which ones to send to the State Department, did they include the foundation? Is the foundation a personal email, or is the foundation something else? I mean, that's just one of the many questions that I would love to ask her in any open forum, Ashley. So, you know, is anyone ever going to get a chance to do that?
I don't think so. And look, Martha, there is a huge difference between cherry-picking interviews in which certain questions are off limits and holding an actual press conference where these questions can be addressed. And I think as she faces these kind of uphill battles with polling when it comes to her trustworthiness and, you know, kind of the transparency issues, she should really think about that, because right now this look of hiding from the public does not help her at all. And it plays to Donald Trump's narrative. You know, we heard him say yesterday it's been almost 300 days since she's been out in public speaking to these issues. And when she goes on these late night shows and makes jokes about it and says things like, oh, with a cloth or something, or when she comes out and says, oh, my emails are boring, no one cares about that, people do care. And it's insulting to the American public that she won't address those issues. Her unwillingness to be truthful, her unwillingness to be transparent, and her lack of general, I guess, care and accountability to the American public is insulting to the American public.
Yeah. I mean, it would, you know, it seems like it should be a requirement if you're running for president to open yourself up to questions from the free press.
Yes. On both sides.
On both sides. Absolutely. I mean, you know, that seems like a gauntlet that you should have to go through to get to this process. Nomiki, I just want to ask you about the WikiLeaks suggestion by Julian Assange when he spoke to Meghan last night. And he said that there are significant revelations in the emails and that they will come out before the election. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, we'll have to see. My question about Julian Assange is, why is he doing this now? If he really did want to make a difference in this election, my question is, why didn't he release this during the primaries, where it actually could have brought forward a more transparent candidate? And granted, I was a Bernie Sanders supporter, but it's a legitimate question. Why is he doing this now? Is he trying to push Donald Trump? He has a record of working with the Russians in many areas, and I think that's something that we have to look at, is his ties with foreign governments. I mean, he clearly has a vendetta against Secretary Clinton because she was at the State Department. And those are the questions.
Nomiki and Ashley, thank you very much. We'll pick it up later. Thanks, you guys.
Nice conversation, ladies. Turns out here on Earth, we may have some neighbors, just a short hop across the galaxy. Why scientists think this newly discovered planet could possibly support life. Coming up.
Coming up
up on Happening Now promises for more leaks on the Hillary Clinton campaign in the coming months. We've got the latest from WikiLeaks, as well as what Julian Assange says about a murdered DNC staffer. Plus, Donald Trump staying mostly on message and keeping up on the attacks on the Clinton Foundation. The media story this week is about a potentially softening stance on immigration. Donald Trump says that's not the case. Karl Rove is here with his take on the Trump strategy. And the shipwreck hunters of the Great Lakes found recently, they join us with their latest discovery. That's all coming up top of the hour.
Well, scientists say they have discovered a new planet that may be a lot like Earth, and get this, it may support life. Tarek Malik is managing editor for Space.com. So this thing's 26 trillion miles away, a long way away. Too early to call it Earth 2.0, or could it be?
It's the closest yet, so it's still a little early. There's still some questions they have to answer, but this is this planet Proxima b, is in the habitable zone, the Goldilocks spot where there could be liquid water. On Earth, wherever there's water, there's life. It's a good candidate. All
right, so it's a good candidate for life. How do we figure out, other than waving at them, if there's life or not?
Well, this is probably a new target for scientists to really race to get an actual picture. What they have seen now is its effects on the star Proxima Centauri, closest one to our sun. And so you can imagine there's new telescopes that are coming. They're all going to be looking at this one star to find this planet and maybe take the first real picture of it, which will give them all of that information.
We'll see if they have any skyscrapers and things like that up there. 4.3 light years away. So the idea of sending like a space probe out there or something, that's going to take a long time.
It's actually closer than that. It's 4.22 light years away. 4.3 is Alpha Centauri. It's kind of like a nearby neighbor star. And there is a plan called Breakthrough Starshot to send tiny little probes out to that star, Alpha Centauri. They're looking now at maybe redirecting to this one.
Wow. All right. Sounds good. Well, if they find anything, come back and tell us about it.
Thanks,
Tarek.
Thank you.
All right. See you soon. Martha?
So the pay-to-play accusations against Hillary Clinton may get even worse for the Democratic nominee. Is WikiLeaks ready to drop something in a document dump? We'll be right back. So an out-of-control dump truck plowed into several cars in California, and here is the cell phone narration.
He just took out that car, B. Yeah. He just took out that car.
Don't you love this?
These guys could do play-by-play.
Roving reporters, the truck barreled down a boulevard in San Gabriel, taking out several cars. Witnesses say the driver appeared dazed behind the wheel. No reports of serious injuries, though, but there was a lot of car damage there. So another day on the highway.
Yeah, it's a jungle out there.
We'll see everybody tomorrow. Have a good day. Happening Now starts right now.